Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the program. It's Tuesday. Today, right now, 2/20/2024. It's almost March. That's terrifying. that's a even further terrifying thought that we're almost through Q1. We're coming up on the end of the fiscal year here, and well, you know, that's yeah, gosh, we're into it. 2024 is I guess it's just on now. And it's been on for the past handful of weeks, really. I mean, feels like all of this news there's just been I talked a little bit about it in the stuff I wrote about kind of game of the year type stuff over on Patreon, which you can get at over at patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. Is that this year just has a weird feel to it, you know, between the layoffs. Here, there's a buzz. There's a buzz. I hear the buzz. You hear that? You hear that buzz? God damn it. So the thing that happens is this microphone cable. There we go. Gets draped over some power cables, and then I fix it, and then my son takes his little bouncy ball and comes in here and he throws it, and it gets all behind where the power cables are, and then I have to reach that back there and get it. And in the process of getting it, the microphone cable ends up crossing over the power cable again, and then we're right back to Buzz City. Got to shield these cables. I don't know, get some ferrite cores in here to handle it. But you know, the year in games is it's a strange one. I felt coming into this year, you know, last year was such a strong year for new releases, obviously, and then alongside that came a lot of layoffs and a lot of weird consolidation and a lot of that weird consolidation going wrong in the case of, you know, situations like the Embracer Group. And, you know, this year is kind of off to a weird start also. And we'll get into more of it in the news. You know, obviously the Xbox business update happened, and that's we'll talk about that. It, you know, short version if you missed it, it's basically what I said it was going to be last week, I guess. But hey, video games, they're still coming out. They're coming more than ever. Now more than ever, video games are coming out at an alarming rate. And I ended up playing a handful of them. Probably the big standout is Arzette, the Jewel of Faramore, which is available now across a handful of platforms. I played it on a PC. It is an homage to the Zelda games that appeared on the CDI. And so it is a game that has a lot of in common with, you know, Link, the Faces of Evil, and Zelda, the Wand of Gamelon, you know, that kind of just side scroll and like the cutscenes and CD quality audio and this mishmash of, like, you know, those games were terrible. But Arzette doesn't fall into those traps quite as constantly, I guess I would say, in that they made an homage to it in terms of the structure of the story and the cutscene style, the animation style, and all of that. But the game itself is significantly better while still looking kind of like those games in at least the quality of the backgrounds at times. It's an interesting... there's a video, I put up a video of it on youtube.com, which is a video hosting website, and you can go check it out. You should look at that thing. You should check that out and see that thing in motion. It is difficult to describe without just saying, hey, it's like these other games that also kind of no one played. But it's such a weirdly specific and dedicated reference to those games that it's amazing. Like the minds behind it are twisted and possibly evil, surely sick. Surely sickness would lead to this. Someone saying, let's make a game that's like these CDI games. But it's kind of perfect. It's shocking in how close they get to making a brand new bad CDI game while kind of avoiding the bad parts, you know? And it works better than I thought it would. I've been chipping away at it. It's, I'm kind of making my way through some more of the levels. I think over the course of the stream last week, I got to about 18% complete. I think I'm up to like 26 or something now. But yeah, it is a fascinating 2D side scroller. There's just little touches like the audio. So that, there's a lot of cutscenes and a lot of spoken dialogue. And the spoken dialogue has a sound to it that sounds like the kind of slightly lower sample rate that you would have gotten from a CD-based video game of its day, from a CDI game, from if you've played Sega CD games. There's that telltale sound of just like the voice kind of sounds like this, and then it's like CD quality, like full on audio that just kind of cuts in and out in weird ways because it has to fade out so the CD can seek to this other thing, so that can, and they deliberately do all of that, and it's cool. The game itself, like that's always the kind of weird thing about this, right? Is you go like, well, is the game good? I think it's fine. I think it is fun enough. Like, it is not especially challenging. You die a lot, but like it's also very low stakes. There's an easy mode if you want to have like health pickups, I think, that you can turn on. But you don't, I don't know that you really need that. But they nail the feel of those games again without falling into the trap of making them play miserably the way those games originally did. And I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty fun to play. It's not gonna like if you're just purely judging it on like today's standards for gameplay and all this other stuff, like nothing about it is going to blow you away. I got a backstep in it recently from a crow. And the backstep's not great. But it's, I guess it is straddling this very difficult line where it is still a functional and solid video game. It's fine, while also being this insane homage, this very over the top homage. Like it is funny how well they do that stuff. Like you just look at it and go like, God damn, like this took a lot. This looks like it took a lot of work to very deliberately and meticulously nail this very like middling thing. And I think you should check it out. I think it is certainly not for everyone. I can't imagine a world where you go into this thing with zero context for what they're trying to accomplish and like have like a great time. You might go like, oh, this game's all right. It's weird. I don't know why are the cutscenes? Why are the people so fluid in all of these scenes? What the hell is going on? You would probably be really confused, I think, if you didn't realize what Arzette was or what it was going for, I suppose. But for the right kind of person, I think it is unmatched, and it should stay that way. No one should try this again. It's It's a nightmare. they have recreated a disaster. But it's like it's a weird homage to a very weird time in video games. You know, the interactive CD-ROM, the like, let's try to make a game on a machine that was kind of built to look at encyclopedias. It's $20. They have also, because Limited Run Games published it, there are like super over-the-top collector's editions that come with like a remade CDI controller, and you know, kind of packaging that is meant to evoke the CDI and a lot of this other stuff. It's a very fascinating target to try to aim for in this day and age. It's so much more than like, so like, you know, and I think even Limited Run has been responsible for some of this stuff, right? Where it's like, you know, companies that come along, we're going to bring Night Trap back. And we're going to bring, you know, we're going to do Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, or, you know, like some of this other stuff that is like from the era, trying to bring it back. And, you know, it's kind of kitschy and whatever else. And like, that's, you know, I'm kind of whatever about that stuff. Because I don't know, again, that's just like, those games were just kind of bad. Like a documentary about Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. Like, it's, you know, that's funny. That's interesting. But like, this feels like so much, I mean, because it's a brand new game, right? I mean, it is. But like the very idea of making a brand new video game and then deliberately chasing after this ridiculous target that is these, you know, deservedly lost Legend of Zelda games is admirable. It is perhaps demonic. It's terrifying. It's yeah, I don't know. It's incredible. I'm in love with it. But it's the sort of thing that you just look at and go like, why would you do this? This is sick. You people are sick. But it is very well done. It is very well done. I also took a look at Tomb Raider. They remastered the Tomb Raider trilogy and put it back out. I guess it's Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3. This was a good reminder to me that boy, I hated those Tomb Raider games. Boy, the control and all of that stuff were so bad. Let's like inch Lara up to the edge, and now we need to push back and she'll hop back, and then we run and jump, and every input is buffered all to hell because this frame rate is this and that. Like, it's just it's just so unresponsive. Those games were always so unresponsive on the movement and jumping and everything. And the people that would like bang their heads against it and do all of these elaborate climbing puzzles so that they could shoot a T-Rex with a pistol and all of that. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? These games are garbage. They were always garbage. And half the reason they got any attention back in the day were people going like, Lara Croft is so fucking hot, man. And like, you people are fucking losers. Just the fucking dumbest. So they put in a different control mode into this that I don't think really helps, but I appreciate that they tried to do something to try to make it controlled differently. And you know, it's something that when you turn on the modern controls, or I forget what they actually call it, it makes it into like when you hold down the left trigger, she pulls out the guns, and then when you let off, she puts them away. Normally that used to be a toggle, so you would toggle to pull the guns out, and then you could shoot, or you wouldn't shoot with the trigger. But with modern controls, it makes it so left trigger aims and right trigger shoots, and you're like, this is weird. This is weird for different reasons. And you know, other than that, it's kind of. And you know, what do you want to call it? It's Uncharted before Uncharted was Uncharted. It's Indiana Jones but with a lady, you know, that type of exploration, puzzle, adventure, pulling levers, climbing up all kinds of crazy stuff. I never got any enjoyment out of those games. There was finally, I want to say sometime on the 360, there was finally a Tomb Raider game where I felt like they had done enough to the controls, to where I was like, okay, actually now I'm like having a pretty decent time with this, and ended up finishing one of those. And then when they, the more recent Tomb Raider games, when they put those out, I was like, these are cool. Like I didn't necessarily like fall in love with them, but it was like, okay, this is, now you're making the character about something more interesting. You're kind of retelling this story and doing some stuff that, actually is fun in its own right. Without just turning it into Uncharted also kind of along the way. Like, I think it would have been really easy just on the, like, Indiana Jones influence scale for Tomb Raider to just go like, well, what did Uncharted do? And then we could tune it closer to that. They kind of stuck to the more of the climbing and weirdness. Like, I don't know. I would just, when the Tomb Raider games were originally coming out, like the marketing around them was just always so embarrassing, so it was always just that feeling of just like, oh, you think that everyone who plays video games is just like some like complete fucking loser, and you're just like, look at this fucking babe. And Eidos played into that as best they could, and mainstream media like ran away with it, and they were just like, oh yeah, no, look, this is the future of digital babes. I was like, yeah, let's say the word babes a few more times, you sick fucks. Like, what the fuck are we doing? It was just embarrassing. It was just one of those things that you're just like, like, there's porn. It's everywhere. I don't, like, look at this pretty lady. It's like, okay, I don't know. She's pointy and weird looking, and all of these polygons are squiggly and messed up because the PlayStation 1 is the PlayStation 1. And I don't know. Are you 8? Are you finding Tomb Raider hot because you're 9 years old or something and you don't have access to the internet? Like, what are we doing here? It's just fucking weird. I don't know. The whole thing was just embarrassing. And I just didn't think the games were any good either, because the controls were so fucking unresponsive, and just the very deliberate pace of those games, and just everything. And then you get into combat sequences and the pistols would just automatically aim at shit, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, I guess I would do that too, given the limitations of the controller and all of that sort of stuff. That yeah, I guess making it a decent shooter along the way would have been too tricky back then, but yeah, I don't know. It just always, there were legitimately cool things happening in video games at that time that were not necessarily like kid oriented, that didn't involve, this embarrassing, like, Lara Croft and so on. Google searches, Alta Vista searches for Tomb Raider nude code, or shooting through the fucking roof over here. I'm like, the fuck is wrong with people? And so playing the remaster brought all of that rushing back. You can hit start at any point and toggle to the old graphics. I mean, there's an open source recreation of the Tomb Raider engine. I don't know if they leveraged that for this. I think it's called Open Lara. And so there's been kind of updated stuff for those engines and all the other stuff. And so I don't know if that person or the people that worked on that are affiliated with this remaster. This remaster's like, yeah, sometimes when a game launches and you're just like, this is janky. Like, there's something about this that, like, there's what this, and so the Tomb Raider Remastered lets you know what it's about right out of the gate by, like, basically pushing a 40-page EULA on you, like the first thing that launches, and it's in like the old Tomb Raider sub-screen font, and you're sitting there scrolling through it before it will even show you, I think, even a title screen. Like it basically, on Xbox anyway, like it launches to that almost. And you're like, okay, scroll, get through it. It's just like, it's a weird, very weird onboarding, I guess. Like, at the end of the day, who cares? But it's just like, it's such a strange, like, first launch experience. It's like some games are like, oh, we're going to drop you in the game, we're going to do this. And like, it makes the whole thing feel like this incredibly low budget. Like, I don't know, we remade the games. Like, you can make them look better if you want. Or Aspire. We don't have, the Embracer Group made this. We don't have money to make them good anymore. So, like, treat this as a big deal, which, you know, say what you will. Tomb Raider was a major factor for a lot of years. Games look great. They run fine. Well, they don't look great. I mean, they look great as like up-resed, cleaned up versions of those original games. But they look nice. But there's just like, I don't know, a real lack of care to the interface around it that, like, when you think about re-releases or updates or remasters or remakes of these original games, it just feels really tossed off. Just like, here. It's we said it was going to run the 3 Tomb Raiders. It does. Go with God. It's just, I don't know. That aspect of it seems like it'd be handled better. But maybe they're like me and they think, you know, Tomb Raider doesn't really deserve it. What else? Early access release for Helskate is on Steam now. That's Hell with 1 L. It's a skateboarding combat game, roguelike, run-based kind of thing. That has very Tony Hawk-like controls. But because you are also swinging a sword, you end up having slightly different control than, you know, just around the camera and character and stuff, because you're lining up shots on enemies and stuff like that. It's interesting, you know. So the idea is, I guess, like, what, you're trapped in hell. You're trying to, it's like someone played Hades and said, all right, what if you were trapped in a hell like world and you had to escape it, but you're a skater? And they're like, yeah. It's really interesting. It is a little early. The early access part of it, I would say, like it definitely could use some polishing up and all of that other stuff. But basically what they do is, you know, you're given quests. So you are going into these levels. There are letters to collect, there are scores to attain, so on and so forth. But also you're kind of picking a quest. And so it's kind of like taking a level of a skateboarding game, a smaller, maybe a little smaller than average. And they are basically considering it a room. And so you are attacking enemies. You need to clear the enemies out of the room to achieve a goal and move on. You choose you choose the rewards for the next goal, like what style of reward you want to get. And so you have situations where you can get tapes, and the tapes will give you basic upgrades for that specific run, where it'll be things like, if you do this specific move, if you do a front foot impossible, you'll have 400% additional damage to your next attack. Or it could be something as cool as, if you do a heel flip, a fat missile comes out of the front of your skateboard, which is actually kind of like that weird deathmatch mode in Tony Hawk 3. And so then from there, you know, you are skating around, doing combos, doing tricks. You know, you are doing these moves to try to basically combo into these attacks. The right bumper and left bumper, I believe, or maybe it's the triggers. Anyway, either the bumpers or the triggers. You are swinging a sword or doing a fat spin attack that has a longer cooldown on it. And so you're attacking these crazy enemies, and you can also dodge out of the way. You'll see an attack cone come out from them, so you can kind of dash out of the way And then all the while, you are still kind of playing a Tony Hawk style skateboarding game. They're not putting a timer at the top of the screen or anything too hectic like that. You can fuck up and skate around, but you will lose HP, and it's hard to regain HP as it is a run-based game. You'll have some currency, hey, stop me if you've heard this one before on the like roguelike light progression system, but you'll have some currency that comes out of the run with you. You can use those to buy permanent upgrades. And so that'll include tattoos that will confer specific bonuses. Like, oh, now you heal at the start of every room, or or whatever. Or you can buy separate skateboards or upgrade your skateboard, and you have weapons that are attached to the skateboard. So the first skateboard you get is that big mystical sword. But then there's like two other ones. One appears to be a giant hammer. I haven't gotten enough currency to unlock any of the other skateboards, but basically, how in a Hades or in some of these other games, you can choose what weapon you want to use before you go into a run. That's that's what you're doing when you choose a skateboard. Is before you go into the run, you choose what weapon you want to have. It's attached to the skateboard, and you go on your way. It's fascinating. It is a little, I will say it's a little rough, but I think conceptually, and one of the things on their roadmap is to have a separate control or camera scheme that feels like them saying, hey, what if we like the areas in which it doesn't quite play like Tony Hawk from a like camera and speed perspective and whatever else are the things that are super tripping me up right now. Like, you can't go 95% of the way there and then not finish. It's hard because they're trying to make a game that also has combat and all of this other shit. And so the camera and some of the other things that they put in the game are better for the combat, like that specific aspect of the game, because sometimes attacks will come at you from off screen. And so they're drawing arrows around your skater to let you know, like, hey, there's a guy over here. There's this over here. And they're trying to remind you of that and trying to give you control in a way that lets you quickly swing around to deal with threats. But that gets in the way of the skateboarding. It's not like Rollerdrome. I see some people mentioning Rollerdrome. It is, well, I think it's significantly better than Rollerdrome. I think Rollerdrome, like the camera stuff, kind of gets in the way a little bit more often than this does. In this game, when you push down, you skate down. And the way to slow down is to pull the left trigger, I guess, is probably the maybe the way to convey like the big difference that they're doing for like the type of game, the like, hey, you sometimes you need to be able to skate this way to get to the combat, and like you're trying to keep this enemy on screen or whatever. And that is probably the thing I would say trips me up the most. Because at this point, and I assume people who have not played a fuck ton of Tony Hawk, that maybe that's not a thing for them, and this is actually maybe better for them to juggle the different things that this game is asking you to do. But for me, instead, it is fucking me up constantly because I'm hitting down to stop, and it's not. And I'm like, jeez, gosh. But you can do a fat Benihana, and if you find the right tapes, you can attach damage upgrades to a Benihana. What a world. The characters are, you are meeting characters who are treating you like garbage. Like the ladies in the shop that sell tattoos and skateboards and stuff like that are constantly giving you shit. And you are trying to escape to find a beach, and you want to fight a guy who, I don't know, maybe he's the devil or maybe he's not, but yeah. It's got the trick buttons work like Tony Hawk, grind button, flip tricks, grab tricks, like that sort of stuff. And it's pretty cool. I would definitely want to spend some more time with it. Maybe we'll stream a little bit of it this week, but like I said, I think there are some aspects of it that are a little bit on the rough side. If I remember reading correctly, I believe there is some Neversoft talent somewhere involved in this project. I believe I saw an email to that effect. But yeah, it's fascinating. Helskate with one L. It's on Steam. Also on Steam, Deep Rock Galactic : Survivor. Survivor. No. Deep Rock Galactic Survivor is an auto shooting survival game in the vein of a Vampire Survivors and so on and so forth. They made an ass game out of Deep Rock Galactic. It's cool. It is. I'm gonna double check because this may also be technically an early access game. Let's look. Yes, it is. So their take on it, on the Vampire Survivor style of game, is that it's still kind of Deep Rock Galactic. It is that camera angle. It's not just, they did not just adjust some things in Deep Rock Galactic and put it back out. It is a top-down camera. It is, you are just basically using the left stick on a controller. You're not really doing much else. It is not, you are not taking control of it to shoot manually, as far as I can tell. But you are picking classes. You can only pick the Scout, I believe, at the outset. I unlocked the Gunner, which is the second class. And you are killing. But basically, you are going underground. You are going underground in a big drill. And anytime you walk into a wall of these caves, of this cave system, you immediately take out a pickaxe and start automatically mining it. And so sometimes there are resources and you'll see them poking out of the walls. And so you'll mine these resources. But also you can just dig a pathway anywhere you want in the level, basically. And so when you've got enemies on either side of you and you're like, oh shit, like, oh, what, right, you can just dig through this wall. And it's sometimes slow to dig. You will find in-run upgrades to increase your digging speed. And you can basically kind of create a little choke point and then hide in the middle of it, wait for enemies to come in and hopefully mow them down. By the end of a run, you'll have 4 separate weapons. It looks like runs are 5 levels. Like you'll get to the 5th level and fight a big boss at the end of it. I don't know if it just ends. I assume that's the end of the biome right now, but I have been unable to beat the final boss in any of these stages. Stop me if you've heard. Sometimes the currencies come out of the run with you and you can spend them on permanent upgrades, like reload speed or life regen or what have you. I think it is a fun one of those because the mining aspect of it ends up making it feel a little bit different. Also, it's being level based, like there's a much shorter timer on every level. Like basically you see a timer kind of going across the screen the entire time. And when it gets to the end, the boss comes out. And the longer you take to beat the boss, the tougher all of the basic enemies also get. And it really does a good job of making you feel like you are constantly being overrun. Like the guns are good, but they rarely feel good enough to where you have completely cleared the screen and feel safe. It is like you are kind of constantly fucked in that game. And that's fun. And then when you unlock the different classes, they'll come with a different starter weapon, and you'll unlock different items that'll show up in the runs differently, and so on and so forth. I mean, there are aspects of it that are relatively straightforward. There's a tiny baby outside the window. It's cold out there. Better wave at this baby. Oh. Sorry, if you're not watching the video, I'm waving at a baby. If you are watching the video, you still can't see the baby. But trust me, the baby's there. Oh, the baby's there. She's very smiley, this baby. At 3 months, almost 4, I guess, almost 4 months. Deep Rock Galactic Survivors is, I think it's a good one of those. I think that is basically what I would say about it. You know, if you were completely against the genre top to bottom, I don't think this is going to sway you. But this doesn't just feel like someone looked at Vampire Survivors and said, we could do that, and then had this like really kind of cheap reskin of it. Like the concepts feel like they are thought out. The digging feels like an interesting new mechanic. You kind of quickly unlock secondary objectives, which are basically just like things to collect as you're going through the level. And so the game, the weapons even will evolve over the course of a run. You know, it's instead of doing like synergies or something like that, it's more like when this weapon gets to level 12, you can choose to give it elemental damage of a certain type, or, you know, or what have you. And I think that that stuff works pretty well. Are the weapons just the weapons from Deep Rock Galactic proper? I'm going to say probably. I have not played Deep Rock Galactic in, gosh, 2 or 3 years at this point. I don't know. It's been a long time. So I don't really remember the names of the weapons specifically, but I bet that I'm going to say at least some of them are probably, at least in name, the same as the Deep Rock Galactic weapons. But yeah, pretty fun. Pretty fun. You should give it a look. Good, you know, voice samples, and it's got character, and all that good stuff. So I don't know. I will stick with it. But yeah, it is early access. They're saying over here, Deep Rock Galactic Survivor. They're expecting it to be in early access for 6 to 12 months. The 1.0 version of the game will be a fully balanced and polished experience. There will also be more of every type of content. But right now it's got 4 classes, 40 weapons, 20 different enemies, 3 biomes, and a bunch of upgrade systems, which, yeah, so I guess I would say it does feel fairly well fleshed out for what it is. Looks like it's $9 right now, which yeah, $9. That's a solid price. Mario versus Donkey Kong came out on the Switch. Messed with that a little bit. There's something in my head. There's a game in my head that I want every time they've ever made a Mario versus Donkey Kong game. There's a feeling I'm chasing, and none of them have ever quite gotten there. Because it's that feeling of when you play Donkey Kong for the Game Boy and you're like, all right, this is Donkey Kong. I guess they just made new Donkey Kong. And then when you get to like level 5 and suddenly an entirely different game unfolds in front of you and you're like, oh my God, what have they done to Donkey Kong? They've turned it into this insane puzzle platformer. Like, oh, there's so many levels. There's a overworld screen. There's a, holy shit, I can't believe what they've done. What am I looking at here? That game, people sometimes refer to it as Donkey Kong 94, though it is just called Donkey Kong. Like, it is just a Game Boy game that says, hey man, it's Donkey Kong. And you're like, oh, Donkey Kong. And then the games that have come since then, they've referred to as Mario versus Donkey Kong. And, there's I guess the first one of those was a GBA game. So I believe this is a remake of a GBA game. And there's been other stuff with the minis and the marching of the minis and what have you that they've done along the way. But basically, this is a Mario puzzle platformer. If you're totally unfamiliar with it, you are basically going into these levels. You are collecting items. You are picking up keys and you are hitting switches to move blocks around and trying to get through a level, collecting optional collectibles as you go, and trying to make a way to the exit. And Donkey Kong is there, and he's bad. The March of the Minis stuff, the Lemmings-esque, that stuff's way more divisive. I thought those games were okay, but again, not They're no Donkey Kong 94. Look, I don't want to say if we were ranking original Game Boy games that Donkey Kong 94 is quite possibly a top 5 game for the Game Boy, but it's probably one of the 5 best games on the Game Boy. Mario vs. Donkey Kong on the Switch is a remake of that, and it's kind of another one of those. They added a casual mode that lets you take some hits without dying, and some other kind of softer stuff. It's okay. Like they're good games, but I have played enough of those to it's kind of doing nothing for me on the Switch, you know. It's good if you haven't played those other games and you're in for it's a really good little puzzle platformer. It just, there's a certain, it feels very staid. It feels very boilerplate. It feels very flat. It feels like soulless is perhaps harsh, but not that harsh. There's just something about it that feels very like slapped out. Just like, here you go. You're like, oh, why did this take all this time to make? Like, why didn't this come out 4 years ago or something? Like, strategic something. It just doesn't. It doesn't feel like they're doing anything cool and fun and new with it. There are, as I understand it, there are some new things in there. It's not just a full-on straight remake of that game. But it's, I wish it wasn't a remake, I guess. Maybe that's the answer. Like that it just, by being kind of another one of those, but being another remake, like there are aspects of it that look nice. You're like, oh, this looks like real plastic. Look at that. They made it look good, you know? But yeah, it's hard to get too excited about it. It's fine. Like I don't think there's anything specifically bad about it, other than, like I said, I think that it just feels a little cold. It feels a little just like, the music's fine, the music's this, the music that, you know, but it doesn't feel like it's something that they are like pushing this kind of, you know, it's a weird franchise, a weird series. It doesn't feel like that they are pushing this series forward. It looks like they're like, hey, what's a thing we could make? There would be like a well-received remake of a game that we could like really, is this something we could do quickly? Because we kind of need some games. Or I wonder how long it was in development. Not that it doesn't seem rushed per se. It's just that it feels like, in the greater context of the Switch and the Switch software library and the first party support on the Switch, at some point you're like, this should be more. This should be a step forward for this specific sub franchise as opposed to just a remake or whatever. But what are you gonna do? Play Helldivers 2? No, because the servers are probably fucking down. Helldivers 2 has been very popular. It is doing numbers, it sounds like. It is simultaneous PlayStation and PC launch. Has that become a talking point for weird console people? I wonder if it has. It probably is, but is there any talking point out there that is like, well, if they didn't launch it on PC, I'd be able to play it? Is it bad? Is it bad that I can know that without having seen any of it? That I can go like, oh, I bet those lunatics are actually complaining about it because of that, aren't they? Yeah. Okay. Multiple people in chat are saying that, yes, that is very much a thing. Fucking people. So predictable in their stupidity, but whatever. Helldivers 2 servers have been extremely sketchy, and they've been working on it, and they've had a lot of downtime, and they've been trying to get it together. It sounded like they had even more trouble over this last weekend. There was a quote from I guess the head of the studio basically saying like, yeah, we're running into some kind of hard limits on some of these numbers. So it's basically the thing you hear when a game has a rough launch like this. And because people always say like, why don't you just turn on more computers? And the answer is always like, oh, it is never it is never that simple. It is never as simple as just throw more processors at it. It is always like, oh, multiple aspects of this game. This database is crumbling. This thing is fucked up. This thing, this server can't handle the load or what have you. And so I'm sure that they are having to go through and like frantically try to optimize even further, or try to rescope some systems in ways that make them scale a little bit easier, or whatever it is. But yeah, there's a couple of things somewhere in a couple of links in their chain are having problems. And so I've played a little bit of it. I like it. I don't know that I'm going to play a ton of it. I do think it's a really good game. And for the specific type of person that game is built for, the specific like people that are like, I've got a squad of friends and we like to play our co-op games together. Like it's a perfect one of those. It's the new Deep Rock Galactic. No, I don't know. I think that the comedic aspects of that game are pretty well done, but I think that, like anything, it's very easy for some of that stuff to get driven into the dirt by an overly enthusiastic community that doesn't know that just repeating the jokes don't make them funnier. If that makes any sense. Like their spin on the Starship Troopers thing, their spin on the like, we're going to talk a lot about democracy, but ha ha ha, it's fascist. Whoops. Like their take on that, I think, is pretty well done. They talk about Super Earth. They talk about like you can name your ship all of these. Like I named my ship the Octagon of Family Values. There's a lot of really goofy, they talk a lot about you're bringing managed democracy to the galaxy and all of this very silly shit. And the idea of Super Earth. It's just, this is Super Earth. Like it's funny. That's really fucking funny. But it's their spin on the Starship Trooper stuff, right? I mean, it's, you kind of know what this is, which is, yeah, I don't know. The media literacy is a weird thing. It's a deliberately difficult co-op shooter, and I have not had an amazing time jumping into it with strangers. Like it works, it's not like I'm dying and not getting credit for finishing like I'm making my way through the game with strangers and all of that sort of stuff, and it works well enough. It's just I'm not like that game feels like it's definitely best played with friends who are shooting the shit on voice chat, and then oh god, shit got weird and everyone gets serious for like 5 minutes while they shoot a bunch of bugs, and then they go back to talking about I don't know why talking about the TV show House. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with me. That was the first thing that came to mind. What do people talk about on a voice chat? Television shows they watch. What do they watch? House. My fucking brain is broken, man. A lot of House clips on TikTok lately. I don't know why. How many of those accounts that just like put up clips from movies do you think are secretly run by studios trying to like get people like or rather, when will studios co-opt that? Because there's just a bunch of accounts on TikTok that seem to be farming engagement by putting up like, here's a clip of Jack Reacher. And it's like, oh, it's a clip of Jack, but the clip stops before Tom Cruise gets in the fight. He's like, oh, he's in a bar and there's a girl just baiting him into fighting their brothers, and you're like, what the heck's going on? And then the clip ends and you're like, well, what the hell? And so are you then supposed to go legally get a copy of... Well, I'll tell you what I did. I watched that scene. I watched the scene that immediately came after it and went like, okay. Yeah, Tom Cruise fought those guys. Jack Reacher doesn't seem like a very good movie. Reacher, the TV show, again, is something I've only seen in clips on TikTok. Seems fascinating. Anyway, Helldivers 2 seems like a game that is best played with your crew, with your posse. And playing it alone and matchmaking into games and stuff, it is instead this feeling of like, yep, yeah, no, I get, yeah. That's, it works as advertised. Well, maybe it doesn't work as advertised, but like it functions as advertised. It works well enough, and all of that. Like maybe you could have some better, like a better ping system, or like a dynamic, like something more like the Apex ping system. I wonder if that would help in match-made games where people aren't really talking. But anyway, it's fine. I love the concept. I love the kind of meta game of like, so there's kind of a process of all of the players are kind of fighting on the same battlefield. And so you'll see like areas of planets get taken as you are spreading managed democracy around the world. And so there's been players who are like, basically there's two factions that you're fighting against. There's the bugs and the robots. And most people are fighting against the bugs, but you could also just go fight against the and like over on the robot side, you just see people going like, I need help. More people need to fight the robots. We need more people. We need more Helldivers over here. So it's like kind of an interesting like metagame aspect of it, I guess. And when the servers even out, I'll probably play some more of it. But right now I'm like, I don't, I like it fine, but I'm not gonna like fight against server stuff and all of that. I've had too many cases, too many evenings now where I've launched it and had it be either totally offline or bumping into queues that are a little too long for my tastes. And it's like, I've got like 9 other games I could play right now. But whatever, it sounds like it's doing super well. Their player counts are off the chart. I imagine that everyone must be psyched. I imagine that everyone internally over at PlayStation that is talking about a more aggressive PC presence is walking around, all getting on Zoom calls or going like, huh? See? Huh? Right? But I don't know. Turns out, if you put out a great game and charge $40 for it, people will play it. I don't know that there's necessarily like rocket science there about like, here's what you do, but like, right, that game is let's double check here, but that game is $40. Yeah. And you can get the Super Citizen Edition bundle for, I believe, $60. So, and right now on Steam, it has mixed reviews. I assume it's because all of the reviews are people just saying it's broken. Can't play with friends, and servers are heart. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. Video games. They're kind of all over the place. Let's get into the news, shall we? Nintendo's next hardware is now likely to ship in the first quarter of 2025. That represents something of a delay, as a lot of folks had been pegging the time frame as the end of 2024. This is something Video Games Chronicle originally had this report, along with they are citing a Brazilian journalist named Pedro Henrique Ludilipe. Says that basically Nintendo has been going around telling publishers, hey, we're not shipping this holiday. We're shipping Q1. Bloomberg has then picked up on this report and have attached it to a pretty big and sharp stock price decline for Nintendo. It's kind of a lot around something that hasn't even officially been announced yet. But according to this Bloomberg story, Nintendo shares fell as much as 8.8% after news started getting out around the delay of the platform. There's not much to say here officially, other than the reporting around this is starting to solidify in a way. The obviously the reporting of the next console happening during this year was starting to solidify, and now like this bump to 2025 seems to be coming from a number of different well-sourced individuals. So I guess my hey, delays happen. I guess one of the people reporting on this story said that they heard from a source, or maybe a source speculated that this was because first party needed more time to get their software together, and they weren't going to have games ready for this holiday. So if they need more time, they're going to push the platform back. And if you had Switch 2 games you were hoping to sell during the holiday season, well, get fucked, I guess. Like ship in Q1, I guess. Whatever. The console will sell fine regardless. They'll still sell all of them, and people will be hungry for games. So perhaps it's not that big of a deal. But hey, boy, this maybe doesn't paint an amazing picture for what Nintendo first party is going to have this calendar year. I don't, maybe this is going to be them. If they were hoping to go into holidays with new hardware, then it's hard to imagine that they had a ton of original Switch stuff lined up. If they're looking to start making that transition. And so I'm curious to see what ends up happening, what we end up seeing out of Nintendo this calendar year, if we are in fact looking at pushing the Switch 2 out of this year into next. Presumably the bulk of their software development is heading in that direction, and so what do they got? Are they looking at Mario versus Donkey Kong going like, can we get away with doing like 3 more of those? Like 3 more games of that size and scope by this year? Can we just like, no, we can't. Oh shit. So I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, I guess like I'm at a point now where I have not heard specifically, but I have not been poking around at it that much. But the idea that the Switch was going to get announced this year and come out this holiday season seemed pretty sound. These delays seem pretty sound as well. So we'll see. At the end of the day, the stock price, like, yeah, like who cares about the stock price? The bigger thing is like companies missing holiday. That is kind of a maybe a bigger deal there. And what does Nintendo have to fill the gap if they are in fact not going to have shiny new hardware launching this year? And what do they got? Maybe it's not that big of a deal. I mean, there's been big long periods of time between first party releases anyway, so kind of whatever. Let's see. But yeah, the sourcing on it is basically this Brazilian journalist was the kind of the first over the line, saying 5 sources claim that the console has shifted to Q1 2025. VGC has then followed up with a lot of its sources, who basically, it sounds like third-party sources that have confirmed that publishers are being told that it will now launch in Q1. According to the sources, third-party game companies were recently briefed on an internal delay in Nintendo's next-gen launch timing from late 2024 to early the following year. One publishing source suggested the delay was so that Nintendo could prepare stronger first-party software for the console. Eurogamer has corroborated the story, saying the console's launch is moving into early next year, but still within the coming financial year, is designed to ensure Switch 2's launch lineup features as many titles as possible. Eurogamer understands. And then, yes, Bloomberg also also weighed in on it as well. I don't know. For my tastes, that is probably enough lined up sources for this to look like it is likely to be true. When do they announce? Yeah, that's kind of the big question is, when does Nintendo announce that they have a new console? GDC is next month, and it's always fun to get developers together at GDC because everyone just talks, and you end up hearing a few things here and there. TGS would be too late. End of summer to launch a console in Q1 would be way too late. So I would not be shocked to see basically, let's say sometime between March and June. That's my guess. And what does that console do? Do you think it does anything differently, or do you think it is just a fancier Switch? I feel like it's just a fancier Switch, but I guess we'll see. A lot of news about upcoming hardware and what it means for this year, and some like this is a weird week. What I'm at the top of the show when I was talking about how uneasy everything seems right now. Sony had its financial report, its earnings call, and in there basically said they are not going to have any big games before March of 2025. That is the takeaway that Polygon.com has put onto that. And there's a quote here from the president, COO, and CFO, Hiroki Totoki, who says, regarding first-party software, we aim to continue to focus on producing high-quality works and developing live service games, but while major projects are currently under development, we do not plan to release any new major existing franchise titles next fiscal year, like God of War Ragnarok and Marvel's Spider-Man. So basically, like, no heavy hitters from the franchises you know and love. The optimistic way to look at that is like, well, clearly that means that they've got some new crazy bangers on the way, but I don't know. A lot of the reporting around that earnings call and the translated stuff. So a translation was updated. So for most of the last week, people have been going off of a translation that I believe was provided simultaneously with the event. So it was kind of a live translation of the president's remarks. And Sony has provided an official translation that attempts to clarify some of those statements. And the statements seemed harsh because the statements were like, yeah, there's people who work in the studios have very high motivation. They're very, very highly motivated. They're very good people, and they have great creative minds and knowledge of live streaming. However, having said that, when it comes to the business, I think there's room for improvement, and that's to do with how to use money, the schedule of development, and how to fulfill one's accountability towards development. Those are my frank impressions. I will continue to engage in dialogue with the people so that we can find the right way to proceed. And so remember that this is the guy that is stepping in on an interim basis in April when Jim Ryan retires. He's the president of overall Sony, not necessarily a game guy, but he's been kind of in the trenches looking around at the Sony business and trying to figure out what the hell it is, what the hell is going on. And the takeaway that was from the earnings call sounded very harsh. Like it was like, oh yeah, everything's going great, except everyone is real bad at everyone's fucking wasting a bunch of money. They should be smarter about money. And that seemed harsh. And now it has been clarified in a way that actually kind of makes it seem a little bit more harsh, because apparently all of that was just about Bungie. And so the word here is, this all kind of came out of a Q&A. I visited the Bungie studios and had meetings with management, and I saw that employees working at the studios were highly motivated, showing great creativity as well as an impressive knowledge of live services. There's a translation update for you. However, I also felt there was room for improvement from a business perspective with regards to areas as the use of business expenses and assuming accountability for development timelines. I hope to continue the dialogue and come up with good solutions. And so basically, I don't know, man. This Bungie acquisition seems like bad fucking news. Because I feel like if this guy who is not even Totoki is not like and maybe he is a games guy, but like he is not the guy who has been day to day on the games business, and so that gives him a little bit of leeway to be harsh. But also, he's presumably kind of getting in there and looking at all of the books and looking at what everyone is doing and trying to wrap his mind around the PlayStation business that he is about to start running. And trying to figure out, like, okay, what are we doing here? What's really going on? And then in this Q&A, I mean, I'm not going to say that that's an outright burial of Bungie, because he's saying that the employees are great. However, being accountable for development time, like, I don't know, they're spending a bunch of money and delaying games. Like, oh shit, dude. And so if this is the guy that is about to come in and run the entirety of the Sony business, at least on an interim basis, and they will presumably find someone to put in Jim Ryan's place, some of the answers that came out of this briefing make me wonder if this guy has been looking at the books for a while and, you know, and the live services strategy that they were attempting to pull off and looking at kind of some of the other spots that Sony has found itself in. And if this is more of a like, all right, Mr. Ryan, thank you. It's just, you should perhaps think about retiring, or something. Not that things are that's not to say that things are in a bad way, but things are not in as great of a place. When we talk about console sales and we talk about the, oh man, Sony's outselling the Xbox and blah, 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 and Spider-Man cost a lot of money, but it'll make it back, and this, and they're selling this, and last week, Sony's stock lost $10 billion in value after its earnings call, specifically related to the PlayStation business. That's according to CNBC. And they went and talked to a bunch of analysts. And basically, the analysts, CNBC says that the analysts are looking at another key metric, which is the operating margin, which came in under 6% for the December quarter, according to a CNBC calculation. By contrast, Sony's operating margin was more than 9% in the December quarter of 2022. And so they have analysts and stuff like that. You only take what analysts have to say so far, right? Because they're not looking at it from a game's, like, qualitatively. They're not, they don't give a shit if Horizon is a good game or not. What did it sell? How much, how profitable was it? Blah, 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 blah. And so this stuff is fairly businessy. But at the end of the day, I think when we talk, we're talking a lot more about the overall health of the industry lately. And some of these signs don't seem great. And so, analysts and all of that sort of stuff, like I said, they know a thing or two about that side of the business. They aren't all up on games some of them in any way. Michael Pachter, as an analyst, he plays some games, he checks some stuff out. Like he is better read on the subject matter than most. But also I think he spends all his time talking about Netflix on TV these days. So so they cut their forecast in terms of how many PlayStation 5s they expect to sell this year. And that margins at the gaming unit, according to CNBC, were around 12 to 13% in the previous 4 years. And so that drop is concerning to analysts, which then makes it concerning to Sony, especially a guy like Totoki, who is entering this position and trying to figure out what the fuck is going on with the PlayStation business. And so this analyst, Atul Goyal, who's at Jefferies, says that despite various, basically like the latest quarter's single-digit margin for Sony is present despite various tailwinds that should have driven up the margins towards 20%, and that the situation is extremely disappointing. Basically saying like, hey, the first-party games are selling, there are more and more digital downloads, so the cost of goods is going down. The PlayStation Plus subscriptions are high margin. They launched they have that tiered subscription service that results in even higher margins for them if people opt into the more ridiculous tiers of that. And his take on it is that their revenue on digital sales, add-on content, and digital downloads are at all-time highs, and yet their margins are at decade lows. This is just not acceptable. And this is almost near decade lows. Yeah. Almost near decade lows for the PlayStation business. So, that's going to impact the stock price if they're looking at it and going like, but I think the takeaway ends up being games are getting expensive. Big games are getting too expensive if big games are becoming less and less sustainable. Now we tie this back into as CNBC is doing later on in their story, we tie this back into the $300 million number for Spider-Man 2. The big games are expensive to make, and while they do sell, they are extremely expensive to make. And so by the time they start turning a profit on them, it's in some cases too late. Also, if they are forecasting that they are going to sell less hardware and that hardware sales are starting to stall a little bit because we're this number of years into the generation, and that, we see a lot of talk about them being unlikely to do price cuts because of the nature of the hardware itself and the expense of the hardware itself, like, the economy of scale type stuff that we usually get to at this point in the generation that oftentimes lets them cut price, which then lets them sell more consoles, which lets them in turn sell more games, which, kind of creates this cycle. If they can't really do deeper cuts on the price of the console, then you don't see that benefit. You don't see that influx of new players who are a little more cost sensitive if you've got a PlayStation 5 that is still $500, and you do. And so naturally that sort of stuff is just going to kind of stack up like this, I guess. So what is Sony going to do about it? Well, CNBC also has another story, this from yesterday, kind of talking more and more about the PlayStation 5 Pro that has been swirling around for some time now in fits and starts, right? Of just like, hey, what's the, what's, I feel like some of the PS5 Pro talk slowed down a little bit. But in the wake of this talk has come back again. And this is, again, a lot of this is analyst talk. So the thing you got to remember is, like, we don't really know what analysts, where their sources are, who their sources are. We've had analysts lead us completely astray about an OLED switch, for example. We've had analysts talk about that sort of stuff. Reporters, this is not the sort of thing that is always 100% accurate. That said, I think it's a pretty compelling case. This is Serkan Toto, who's a consultant, whose name comes up a lot in situations like this. And CNBC is quoting him as saying, there seems to be a broad consensus in the game industry that Sony is indeed preparing a launch of a PS5 Pro in the second half of 2024. And Sony will want to make sure to have a great piece of hardware ready when GTA 6 hits in 2025, a launch that will be a shot in the arm for the entire gaming industry. It's just a shaky stack of sources on a lot of this stuff. But Sony needs an exciting piece of hardware. One way to excite people is to cut price on it. Another way is to double dip on your most extreme fan base by selling them another one. And Nintendo has been very good at selling you another one for a variety of reasons over the years, right? And so this PS5 Pro talk's been going around a long time, and now as a basically with Sony expecting what they're calling a gradual decline in hardware sales, how do you prop that up? Like I said, one way would be to cut price. Another way would be to ship something new. And so this timeline kind of makes sense. But like some of the profit is so yeah, but if Sony's goal is, as the quote is, to optimize sales with a greater emphasis on the balance with profits, that doesn't sound like, hey, we're going to cut the price of the PS5 because we're launching a PS5 Pro. That almost sounds like, oh yeah, with the $500 console, that's going to be our entry level model. You can get it discless if you want to bring that price down a little bit lower, but if you want a professional PlayStation 5, was that $700? Was that $600? $700? $800? That doesn't seem like a very attractive, yeah, sure, they could do temporary price cuts around the holidays. And, right now I think in the UK, there's like 70 pounds off of a slim PlayStation 5. And so like deals and sales are still happening. But, I don't know. The market doesn't seem like it would support a console that expensive. And so maybe they will just kind of bite the bullet on it, cut price on the regular PlayStation 5, and eventually just kind of push the Pro out as a $600 item. I don't really know. I don't know. But also, trip on this. Okay. So if a PlayStation 5 Pro console were to ship in late 2024, what will you play on it? Sony has already come forward and said, hey, we don't have any major franchise games planned for like basically like the rest of this upcoming fiscal year. Like we don't got nothing in the kind of like massive franchise game space. So all of that kind of adds up to just a bunch of weird timing. There will certainly be third-party games that, there'll be stuff like, but this all just feels fucking bad right now. Like there's a feeling in my stomach that I get discussing this week's news, that just doesn't like gaming is massive. It's never been bigger, blah, blah, blah. But basically, and we'll start talking about Microsoft here in a minute. This feels like PlayStation kind of not running into a wall, not crashing into a wall, nothing, but like this feels like PlayStation has been feeling the same market pressures that everyone else has. They just decided to do nothing about it. And then at some point last year, they said, we're going to invest in a bunch of live service games. And then some of those got canceled and some of those got delayed and all other stuff, because you can't just show up and say, we're going to make 12 live service games and have that go well. And so in some ways, Sony feels like it's about to get kind of left in a lurch here, where they don't necessarily have the pipeline set up to produce games in this time frame, but they need them because they're cutting forecast on hardware. The stock is taking hit. Like, there's just like bad markers around the edges of their business that they're going to look at and go, okay, what can we do to head this off? This is not where we can't be here for very much longer, or it's going to start to have actual bad effects on what we're trying to accomplish here. And so what do? I think you get a bunch of fucking games like Helldivers together, like, obviously, but it's not that simple either. I think you need a more diversified portfolio. And I think that Sony has maybe not been the greatest on the first party side at having that in place. So but that, again, none of that happens overnight. None of that happens. Like, they need to think. They have to be thinking longer term about what they're going to do with their business. And so it feels like that they're running into some of the same problems that Microsoft has, but again, they chose a different strategy, and it worked out for them longer, but now is kind of getting a little iffy, if you know what I mean. And so they're going to, I don't know, they'll have a weird year this year, and into next year, and so on and so forth. I think with the problem with the PlayStation 5 Pro is, I think, I said the same thing about a PS4 Pro when word about that started getting out, and I started talking to a couple of developers that were working on Pro ports of PS4 games. And hearing from them, it was like, yeah, it's better. Like, yeah, totally. Like, there's extra, like, there's more power in this. It's cool, but like, it's not a game changer. It's not, like the PlayStation 4 Pro was them trying to capitalize on interest in 4K TVs as much as anything else, and their 4K solution wasn't ready. It wasn't, like, it was good because it solved some of the problems around the PlayStation 4 being kind of weak, that just overall, like, that generation launched weak. We needed the half-step consoles because they ran out of road earlier than they normally do, I suppose. But like, a lot of the stuff around the PS4 Pro was then like, they were trying to shoehorn in 4K support and all their checkerboarding and upresing and finding different methods to make games like, we want to make sure that when the TV pops up the resolution, it just says 2160p, and we don't give a fuck about anything else. So like, okay, seems like a bad way to go, but all right. Like, we're still not at a point where 4K is always performant, Like, what games are we getting that are like, I'm sure there's a list of games that that support 4K and 120 hertz, but like, it's not a long list. It's not a long list. So I don't know. It's weird times out there. It just seems like very, very weird times out there. And who knows? Maybe they just continue to deploy their checkerboarding techniques, and instead they render at 1440 and scale up and whatever else. And but realistically, like, what do you think they can get away with charging for a console? Like I said, $800 seems like an insane and almost illegal amount of money to charge for a video game console. But I think even at $800, are they able to have a meaningful hardware bump in there that is going to matter? Or will it matter enough for people that are making that upgrade, that are trying to, or will it have to be even more than that. I don't know, man. I don't know. That shit feels bad. And everyone says the economy is improving, and everyone says that everything is bouncing back, which I tend to believe is actually true right up until you go try to buy some groceries. Because I don't know if you've looked, but grocery prices are still out of fucking control. The price of beef going through the fucking roof. But no, it is wild. Dave in the chat says, I could see Pro at 500 and a Slim at 400. Yeah, maybe, but like, okay. Who knows? Who knows if they can cut the base level price that low? I don't know what they're making them for these days. I think they end up selling it for $600. What are their expectations for how well it ends up doing? Like, what percentage of their user base or what percentage of their sales going forward do they want to be Pro models versus base level models? Does it let them get the price cut and then hopefully they upsell people to Pro in store? Like there's all kinds of just weird scenarios there that do kind of present themselves, but none of them are clean, delineated lines of like, if they do this, then this. And so I don't know. Aspects of that don't feel good. Meanwhile, Xbox had its business update, as we've been talking about for the past few weeks here. They must be pissed. Like on some level. I imagine like just exasperated more than pissed maybe around all of the leaks and stuff about what Xbox is doing and all of the weird fucking fallout from. So think about it, like all these reports started showing up about how all these different games are coming to all these different platforms, and oh my god, Gears of War is coming to PS5, and this is coming to this, and Starfield is coming to this. While they certainly had plans, in mind for what they were doing about making more games multi-platform and whatever else, I'm sure, very clearly not the way they wanted to reveal this information. But like all of that shit leaked out, or how much of it is true is kind of maybe worth calling into question at this point as well. But I would believe it up to a point. So Microsoft had it. They put out the podcast. They chose to reveal this information on an episode of the official Xbox podcast, which they treated as a very special episode. And Tina Amini got up there and interviewed Xbox leadership walked them through some talking points. And the talking points are very sensible and basically exactly what you would expect them to be in terms of like what Microsoft is doing and their public facing reasons for why they would do it. And some of the lines they drew there were like, well, these games that we did, and they did, okay, the specific thing they did not do is tell you which games were coming to other platforms and what platforms those will be, which is annoying. But I suppose when you've probably almost certainly signed agreements with Nintendo, allowing Nintendo to reveal that information on a Nintendo partner-focused direct, you signed that away. So you can't get up there on your podcast and say, hey, it's Sea of Thieves. Hey, it's Hi-Fi Rush. The 4 games that they seem to be moving forward with are Hi-Fi Rush, Sea of Thieves, Pentiment, and Grounded, which kind of check all the boxes for the lines that they are drawing around this process, which they're taking games that they say are over a year old, and in some cases are games with online communities that would benefit from having more players, and in some cases are just unique experiences that would do well to find a bigger audience. And they, as I figured they would, as I believe I said they would, they tied all this into their existing strategy. They tied all of this into like, yeah, we want more people to play games regardless of where they play them. And like, fucking, yeah, guess what? We're doing it. And by the way, Call of Duty is a multi-platform game. By the way, Minecraft, one of the biggest games in the world, is a multi-platform game that is one of ours. So we've been publishing multiplayer games. Ori came out on the Switch, for Christ's sake. You know, they do have a bit of a legacy when it comes to, and some of that legacy, to be fair, is through acquisition. And so it's stuff that they kind of inherited and went like, oh, fuck. And not necessarily their first choice. But regardless of the reasoning, Microsoft is a major third-party publisher on the PlayStation. Between putting out Minecraft and putting out Call of Duty, they are one of the biggest third parties in the world, which they made sure to mention. So this doesn't. So the reason I say they must be fucking annoyed is because there's nothing they can say now that will probably like qualm the weird rage that people got over the rumor side of things. If they were able to just like tell their story and just be like, yeah, we're doing this with some of our older games, and we're excited about it. We said we were doing this. This is part of our existing strategy. Like, hey, well, you know, hey, man. If they were able to present it as really not a big deal, then I think that would have been fine. Because I think if you hear the story as, oh yeah, Sea of Thieves is going to come to Switch, that's cool, right? Because then more people can play Sea of Thieves. Like, I don't think the weird, like, Xbox Defender squad is going to piss their pants over that. But instead, when it becomes, oh, Starfield's coming and Gears of War is coming, then you've just got soiled diapers all day long from these people. And so then Microsoft was like, well, I guess we do have to come out there and say something, because these people are spreading bullshit. They are spreading weird. They are spreading half-truths or non-truths about our plans for the future. The sky is falling for them. We need to get out there and just kind of say what we're doing. And then they spent a week looking at things going like, well, what can we say? Shit. Well, Nintendo is going to reveal these, so we can't say games, but we can say that we're doing it, but we... Ugh. And so I think they found themselves in a situation where, you know, where there was no easy or clean way out of it. And this is perhaps the danger with the way that they have kind of stoked aspects of that fan community by following those people on Twitter and occasionally retweeting some of their funny jokes and so on and so forth, is for better or worse, they kind of asked for it. And so you know, can only feel so bad about them. But there were definitely like reporters, you know, fueling this to a certain extent. So the thing I was saying is like, there's maybe no way to qualm those people, is because now they viewed this as an opening of some door, even though, as I said, this door has kind of been open for a while. To where now every single franchise, they're going to go, oh, is this coming? Or, you know, the assumption now is not that like, oh, these 4 games are coming and they're going to do it on a case-by-case basis. I feel like a lot of the assumption has been like, well, the Earth is flat, and as a result, Starfield is definitely coming to PlayStation 5. They're just not telling us that yet. To which I say, yeah, maybe. Sure. Like, but I am also of the mind of that they should just do that eventually, you know? And so they tried to reiterate the, like, you know, Game Pass, and they gave a new subscriber number for Game Pass, and you know, they did an interview with The Verge. Phil Spencer got on The Verge and talked a little bit about some of that aspect of business. And so they framed this as not necessarily like a, you know, it took on a very negative connotation in the run up to their business update, you know, to the point where you're like, oh man, like no one sane thinks that they're getting out of hardware. No one sane thinks that like everything is going to come day and date to all platforms. But at the same time, you're like, man, these guys are just getting beat up for weird reasons, but also their strategy seems off, and they don't have the fucking games, and they don't have, at the end of the day, they do not have enough big games. And so that's ultimately why they're in positions like this. Is because if they just had better software across the board, it's easy for me to say, right? If the games were great and out, then they wouldn't have this problem. So they basically said that they'd be looking at this on a case-by-case basis, and I think that they should. And that's a sound approach. I think that that makes sense. I think that in conjunction with it, and that the things that they're doing make sense even in the confines of them continuing to have a console business, right? I mean, again, no one sane thought that they were just never going to make another console ever again. You know, what shape that console takes, I think, still is potentially up in the air, and we'll see. But at the end of the day, they make so much money on Game Pass, they make so much money in subscriptions and all of that sort of stuff. They're not going to do anything that purely cannibalizes that. And putting games out day and date on multiple platforms does that. So obviously, they would not jeopardize they spent a good long time building Game Pass, and even if the bloom is off the rose to a certain extent with at least some percentage of consumers and developers around Game Pass and satisfaction with Game Pass, it is still a very large number of subscribers for them. So I expect we'll see a couple of these games get announced at this Nintendo thing. That seems like a likely outcome here. Let's say it's definitely Hi-Fi Rush. Let's say Hi-Fi Rush is a shadow drop, and Sea of Thieves is a separate announcement for later, if we're just guessing. I figure because that last Hi-Fi Rush patch had colored t-shirts patched into it at some point, that it's much closer to being ready to go than anything else, but I'm just guessing. So yeah, but at the same time, like, you know, you kind of look at the overall Xbox business separate from the numbers, because that's all we can do, really. You know, the thing I'll say to their presentation is that they don't come across as dissatisfied with the numbers, and this announcement doesn't seem panicky. If it was panicky, it would be Starfield right now. You know, they would be like, "Oh shit, we gotta make this happen. We gotta put our bigger games over there ASAP." But no, like the reasoning they give for why these 4 games, assuming that the 4 games that have leaked are indeed the 4 games, it just makes a ton of sense. Again, online games that would benefit from crossplay. Online games that would have livelier communities if they came to other platforms. I just think that makes a ton of sense. There is zero reason not to put Sea of Thieves out on PlayStations and Switches. Just do it. Grounded, same deal. You know, Grounded with all of its, like, did Grounded ever find a real audience? Like, I don't know that it did. That game was in their game preview program for ages, and the people that got into it got way into it. But it never seemed like a critical mass of people. It never seemed like a big, massive number. It was just like, oh, you know, I hear Grounded's cool. I messed with it. It's neat. I don't know. And so giving that game a chance to find a larger community, I think it makes a ton of sense. If that helps it catch on so that they can either continue to support that game, or if they can continue to build on it in the future, or build if this leads to them being able to build a sequel or whatever it is, you know, I think that's worth a shot. So I don't know. The sketchier kind of talk just gets into, like, they also, again, it's probably something they would not have said if they hadn't been kind of forced to respond to all of the weird online uproar. But they kind of threw a bone out there about new hardware. It's not much of a bone. There's not much to this, but there is a claim here that you're like, oh, okay. And this is something that Sarah Bond said during the broadcast, and she's the president of Xbox. There's some exciting stuff coming out in hardware that we're going to share this holiday, and we're also invested in the next generation roadmap. And what we're really focused on there is delivering the largest technical leap you will have ever seen in a hardware generation, which makes it better for players and better for creators and the visions that they're building. And Video Games Chronicles pulled a few more quotes out of this. Our developers can build the specs of our hardware, and we invest to make sure that when they do, the games are going to run great on our hardware. But they're going to be able to be accessed across any screen because of all the other investments we make. So we're giving them an easy way to access as many players as possible, and so on and so forth. So, okay, that's two hardware things. One for this calendar year, one for this holiday season, and another box. No timeline given on next generation hardware. But that said that they will have something to share this holiday. You have to figure that whatever they're sharing this holiday is some kind of update or revision or something to some piece of their line. And perhaps actually it could just be something in maybe a new segment. So I'm trying to think about the deck that leaked out that they said was out of date. You had the updated Brooklyn Xbox Series X that was a diskless device, with the idea being that would be the console going forward, which they have since come out and kind of rebuffed that a little bit and said, hey, the hardware those are old plans. That's not necessarily where we're headed. Which I think makes sense. There's a lot of things that they'd probably ideate on and a lot of times that they spend looking at where the market is heading and try to anticipate, like, okay, is digital only? Does it make sense now? No. Okay, what about this? There was also some stuff in there about an updated controller with perhaps better haptics, which I could see them doing. I could also potentially see them doing a streaming device and a handheld, or you know. So The Verge asked Phil Spencer about an Xbox handheld, and he was like, "Oh, I love those. I love handhelds, but nothing." But yeah, there was they did a survey about DualSense style haptics. And so yeah, do they launch a handheld device? Can they pull off a portable Series S? I doubt they could pull off a portable Series X, but does something like that make sense for this holiday season? Do they do that? Do they do a streaming device? Do they do and do they try to go down that road? Maybe. I guess I'll say I think they will eventually embrace some sort of handheld. There was also in the Verge article, there was mention of something I talked about last week, which was that they had said that they want to improve the gaming experience for Xbox apps running on Windows, on like the Lenovo Legion Go and the ROG Ally, or even a Steam Deck running Windows or whatever. that they want to improve the experience of, you know, using a touch interface or a controller with the Xbox app, or finding better ways to get in and out of games than the way that those things do it now, which is clunky and terrible. In some cases, like Steam OS is amazing. Like, there should be a Steam OS style presentation for Windows that they can use to get you in and out of, you know, games running on the Xbox store, or, you know, or whatever. They need to do that. But, you know, in terms of this year, like, I don't know what they it feels like that they have kind of come out and said that that they have come out and said that a pro version of the console of the Xbox Series X wasn't really something that they were looking to do. That was something that came out of the court case. That it was something that they were not doing. And I think that makes sense. I guess, well, look, you know, this generation, from a console sales perspective, if we go back to those numbers, it's not going amazingly for them, right? I don't think that a half-step Xbox console changes anything for them. You know, if this holiday season, if they were to say, we've got a slightly more powerful Xbox, I don't think that matters. I don't think that changes. Again, I think for like this generation of hardware, the die is cast. They sell some boxes to existing Xbox players. You know, some people maybe who have been undecided to potentially buy an upgraded Xbox and whatever else. But I don't think a half-step upgraded console like shifts the playing field for them in a massive way. Right. And so that makes me think that when they talk about like this little bone about, what we're really focused on there is delivering the largest technical leap you will have ever seen in a hardware generation. Are they going to try to do the thing again? Are they going to try to do the thing they did with the Xbox 360? Are they going to try to move off of this platform onto the next one a little sooner than Sony might want to, in an attempt to kind of jump ahead? Are they going to, because, you know, all bets are off all over again, right? We launch new consoles, we get to a PlayStation 6, we get to a next Xbox, and then it's like, hey man, we'll fucking figure it out all over again. You know, when they did it for the Xbox 360, it worked quite well for them. When, you know, Sony kind of did it to them on the PS4 a little bit, right? Like they kind of but again, just the I don't know, man. The what does that look like? What is the biggest technical leap you've ever seen in a hardware generation? What does that start to look like from a price perspective? What does that start to look like from a power perspective? What does that start to look like from a like thermals, and, you know, like all of that sort of stuff? Like, what's the hardware out there they could go get that would make that console feel like fucking crazy? Like, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Like, I don't know what that is, because I think if you stick with the existing kind of pathway we're on in terms of hardware power and what have you, what do you end up with there? You know, from a pure just GPU focused perspective, like, do you end up with something that's equivalent to like a 4090 or a next generation? You know, that'd be even more expensive. But like think about what they could sell for console prices sometimes over the next like 3 or 4 years. Like, what is that part? What is that GPU part? What is that hardware? And does it matter? Because I think some problems get solved by throwing additional graphics power at it, right? But again, I think if you took an Xbox Series X and said it's as powerful as a 4090, I don't know that that's necessarily super compelling, right? Or it's not as compelling. Like to the average player, to the mainstream, right? I mean, you and I are gonna look at it and go like, well, now we're doing 4K here, we're doing this and we're doing that, but like that doesn't change the core fundamental offering of what these games are. And the vast majority of games on Game Pass these days are not pushing the existing hardware to a massive degree. So then what are they talking about? Presumably it's not just a better GPU. Are they thinking about something that they view as a fundamental shift in what a console can do? Or perhaps, like, more cynically, are they going to have a dramatic push into embarrassing AI technology and try to, like, brand their box as, like, it's thinking again? Like, like, is it something where they can say, hey, we're putting neural processors in here in conjunction with whatever else, and now it's going to do what? It's going to do what? All this stuff could happen in the cloud already. So what? That's a conversation that I feel incapable of having, because somewhere, presumably, maybe not, and that's a larger problem, but somewhere, presumably, there are game developers that when they think about what they could be doing if they had access to that type of processing, they're like, oh, we could make games do this. That there's something that games aren't doing now, that if you gave it this, then you'd have this. And it's not just like, what if the NPCs could make it up as they go along? Because like that, fucking who cares? AI voice stuff can already happen. And storage space is cheaper. If you're going to do AI voices, just pre-record it all anyway. You don't need to be real-time processing your AI voices in order to make that work, right? So like, what do you really benefit from there? Other than the buzzwords and other than the, I'm sure in a mainstream sense that people would love that, right? People would, from an investor perspective, especially a company like Microsoft, which if you have forgotten, they are fucking extremely all in on AI and OpenAI and ChatGPT and all of them. Like they are invested heavily in that shit. So it would be corporately aligned for the Xbox division to push into that space somehow. I just don't know what the benefit to video games are, Like, I don't give a shit if Harley Quinn is addressing me directly if the game still sucks. And anything they do, if there isn't parity on the other side of the console, aisle, it just doesn't get used. Because third parties are going to develop for the lowest common denominator. And so if Sony comes along with a PlayStation 6 and they don't invest heavily in all that bullshit, guess what? You'll see nominal use of weird AI features in a situation like that. But maybe Sony will go down the same desperate road as well for the same desperate reasons. And who can say? So yeah, I guess like I just don't it's hard for me to fully envision where this stuff is headed, but just to try to take the phrase the largest technical leap you have ever seen in a hardware generation and try to unpack that a little bit. It's hard to really envision something that still fits with what we think of as our regular definition of what a video game console is and what a modern video game is, and so on and so forth. And find ways to figure out what that innovation is. And that is exciting in a way, right? The very idea of just like, okay, well, you know, someone eventually is going to fucking figure out a thing that fundamentally pushes games and game design forward. But I don't think that AI and LLMs in their current form are necessarily going to do that in a dramatic way. Right now, it's a good way to get funding. Right now, it's a business buzzword. And when you really go and look at what most AI is putting together and the things that people tout about, like, look at this, you can type in a thing and generate video. And you're like, actually, it sucks. Actually, it's broken. And then people always say like, well, yeah, but the next generation of this is going to, like, okay, well, actually, that's what a lot of people said about virtual reality. That's what a lot of people say about a ton of new technologies, right? Is there's always like, well, yeah, but in year 4, you're going to fucking get your dick blown out of your asshole. It's going to be so impressive. And you're like, okay. The general trajectory for a lot of new technology is like the thing hits and it's a big game changer. And then when it comes to actually making it better, it's a very slow grind. Years of updates, years of technological improvements that are incremental in nature and not fundamentally revolutionary. It's why everyone is fucking bored with phones now, because they're the same. Today's phones are incredible, but no one, who cares? We've had phones for a decade plus now. We've had phones like this for a decade plus, right? And so the people that are just like convinced that just like, well, I mean, yeah, okay, this lady has 7 fucking fingers and they're twitching like this all the time in the video, but like when they fix that, I'm gonna say, make me the new season of NYPD Blue, only they're all dinosaurs. And that's what I'm gonna watch. I would hate to be in television right now because their days are numbered. Like, you people are fucking idiots. Are you fucking kidding me? It just doesn't seem like that stuff's going to get better to the point where that's going to happen without, and not in 5 years. You stretch the timeline out long enough and quantum computing happens in a more mainstream real way and blah, blah, blah. Like, sure, maybe you eventually get the CPU power. I mean, if we even have the fucking electricity to fucking power it all, shit. Be fucking banging rocks against cave walls after the fucking nukes drop by the time this fucking shit gets together. Fuck, man. That's why it's embarrassing to see all these companies chasing all the AI assistant and all this other stuff. Like, I don't need someone I can fucking talk to. I need like a thing that'll just get shit fucking done. Because Siri sucks. Like, Siri's fucking awful. It's unreliable. And that's, if you are embracing these types of technologies and stuff, like, Siri has been dog shit for a very long time. In terms of just like what it's even capable of. Like, you ask it certain questions and it's just like, I don't know, here's a web page. You're like, oh, cool. So yeah, sure. At some point, like, if, we throw some more generative AI into the equation so that Siri can read a fucking web page for me because I've got my hands full, then sure. But then Siri's going to start cataloging web pages that are full of AI written bullshit, and it's going to be bullshit feeding bullshit, and it's all going to be even more broken. So, I don't know. Siri's really good when I put one of these drinks in the freezer, like 45 minutes before the show starts, and I say to it, wake me up in 30 minutes. I don't even say set a timer, because like the timers don't go off the same way an alarm does. So I have to say, wake me up. Because if I set a timer, my phone's on silent and timers don't get through that, but the alarm does. So I have to lie to it to get it to do the thing I want to do. So sure, there's room for improvement. Absolutely. Don't get me wrong. Like, but I think the use of AI is fun because it's so fucking stupid. And because the uncanny valley is wide and very, very uncanny. And so I find all of that very thrilling because it's broken and it's like this new frontier of garbage. And that's really cool. And then when you see like major companies go like, no, this is going to be the future of everything. You're like, no, you mean the thing I can use to make Vince Russo's voice sound like mine? You're pinning the hopes of your entire company on this shit. Getting like way better. Oh man. And seeing people deploy this stuff now, like into commercial settings and into areas that they're clearly not ready for. Like you see that there was the airline that had a chat bot that invented like a very cool and friendly like refund policy and made it up out of nowhere. And then the company was forced to abide by it seemingly, because it's just like shit like that. Or like there's the video going around of like an AI, like an LLM calling someone on the phone and saying like, you inquired about a business thing. Are you still interested? And then the guy saying no. And then the thing saying like, is there anything else I can help you with? And then him saying like, yeah, can you get me a recipe for something? And then immediately going, sure. And then immediately starts reading out a recipe because it's just some fucking generic AI chatbot with no guardrails on it. And you're like, what the fuck, dude? Like, it's great. It's great. The world is great. It's so fucking hilarious. It's fucking hilarious. And so I love that. I love that we're in this, but like the race to replace fucking, which shit, man, they aren't even paying people enough, right? I mean, they're still racing to replace these incredibly underpaid people with a fucking robot that sucks. And they're just like, yeah, this robot sucks. Yeah, but at least it's not humans. Like, Jesus Christ. It's fucking, like, it doesn't matter. The quality of it doesn't matter. There's like, I don't know, I read the brochure. It'll get better. All right, man, cool. It will get better, but to actually cross the gaps that it needs to cross in order to work the way that people are trying to sell us on right now, it's not some 5-year thing. So when we apply that all back to video games, on the fly neural processing, whatever bullshit buzzwords we want to use to reference this stuff, all of that comes down to how does that actually make games better? And you see there are middleware companies and other people out there that are trying to like, well, we hooked all these NPCs up to ChatGPT. Is there a Skyrim mod for it yet? I assume there is. And like that's not actually what players want. You might think you want that, but like what players want is they don't want to ever have to think about that shit. But they want to also have engaging and meaningful experiences. And so having an LLM dream up busy work for a player to do is not going to be as good as, hey, some actual people writing an overarching story sat down and wrote some quests. And they wrote some dialogue for those quests. And they put those quests in this part of the game because that's where it makes the most sense story-wise. And they did this. And I don't think that that's going to be beaten anytime soon. If anything, it feels like the trend is, like if we think about the games that we play forever, if we think about the games that have these incredibly long lifespans, they're not story-driven games anyway. On the story side of things, on the the single-player game side of video games, I feel like the cry I see more often than not is people saying they want shorter, tighter games with less bloat, less open world, and so having AIs just kind of dream up a bunch of busy work and bullshit to throw in the middle of a game like that doesn't, we don't need that. That's not something that's going to make games better, but or more importantly, to speak the language. Like, that's not something that doesn't sell more copies of games, other than to a very specific crowd of just like basically it's like the same pitch as procedurally generated content, which we already have, by the way. There are plenty of procedures in place that can generate content. It doesn't need to be whatever horseshit OpenAI is trying to fucking serve the people. And people are already mad at that. So even, you know, so yeah, I don't know, man. Like the idea of the infinite video game is something that I think only appeals to people that don't actually play story-driven video games, or really any video games, because they're just business dudes. And the games that we actually will invest thousands of hours in, are oftentimes social experiences, or they're not story-driven things. They're, you know, yeah, Spelunky is a great example. Like, you know, Spelunky's not, we add a bunch of talky AI to it or whatever. Like, it's not going to do a thing. But like, the clockwork nature of something like a dwarf fortress works because there are humans with their hands on the wheel. And the emergent nonsense that comes out of that is sometimes part of the fun. If you get too much of it, it starts to look broken. The same way bad procedural generation just looks like cookie cutter stamped shit all over your game. You know, you need to be smart about how you employ those sorts of things, right? So, but again, I think that, you know, we look at Fortnite, we look at Roblox, we look at the games that, even things that ostensibly have a story. Like, take a World of Warcraft. If we're just thinking about games that people will invest thousands of hours into. The reason people spend thousands of hours playing something like a World of Warcraft is not because they are very wrapped up in the lore. The lore helps. I mean, you know, you couldn't get away with not having lore or a world or any of that stuff, right? You need something. But the people that are playing that game for hours and hours and hours and hours are doing it because it's a social experience. They're doing it because they have a guild, they have friends, they have people that they play with, they have other humans they're fighting against. They, you know, like, even the people that are super, super deep into the WoW lore, it's not the thing, you know, if that was all it was, then all they would do is they would play through the content once and stop and go like, cool. And then they would unsubscribe until the next thing came out. And some people do that, and that's fine. But like, the people that are playing it fucking nonstop still to this day, it's because they're playing it with people. It's because they're playing it, you know, they want to grow a character. They want to do a thing. They have things they want to achieve outside of the narrative. And so the idea of AI written narrative and dialogue and all the other stuff, like, it doesn't actually, this is not something that saves video games. This is not something that it doesn't even seem like it saves that much time, maybe a little bit of money. You know, if you're not employing narrative designers, I guess, but like, just hire the 4 people and pay them. It's not, you don't need it for that anyway. The other thing kind of announced in the Xbox business update, Diablo 4 is coming to Game Pass on March 28th. That is the first of the Activision Blizzard games to be coming over. I guess it makes sense for them to piecemeal them out like this and not just drop them all at once, but I wish that they had just dropped them all at once and just been like, all right, we own this now, so now it's all part of Game Pass. And I wonder what they will do with Call of Duty. I don't know. The other thing is that, you know, the only other games that were mentioned in that business update were specifically Starfield and Indiana Jones, which, you know, was Phil Spencer basically saying, like, those are not games we are considering bringing over. And kind of that was used as a way to kind of get into, like, okay, these games are older, they benefit from this, like they fit a specific profile that we think that they would benefit specifically from being on other platforms. And the rest of it was them talking about that they are continue to be dedicated to Xbox hardware, the Xbox platform, Xbox Game Pass, and so on and so forth. So business as usual at the end of the day. That's why I say they must have been kind of pissed off with the way that this information got out. And you start to wonder, like, when that stuff does get leaked, it probably gets leaked by people who don't have the whole story either, right? Because it sounds like the people that had the knowledge of what was happening was actually relatively low throughout the company, to the point where they had to have multiple internal meetings to say, like, no, we're still going to make Xboxes. Like, come on. And I wonder if this ends up doing any lasting damage to the brand, similar to the Xbox One reveal and all of that. Like I said, I think there will be a faction of people that will, anytime a game gets announced, you'll now see some snide, like, well, I'll just wait for it to be on PlayStation, you know, like some weird shit like that, because people are just going to be dicks, because that's, I don't know, that's the nature of talking about video games on the internet, I suppose. And the other side of it is I do think that, you know, like if we stretch this timeline out long enough, I do think that it does make sense for them eventually to bring a game like Starfield over to the PlayStation. I don't think it's necessarily, like, if they wait long enough, and if it's a game that's at least a year old, like all of that stuff does still protect Game Pass, because I think the people that would ever get angry about that shit are people that play games at launch, are people that are part of the conversation when a game comes out, you know? And so if a year later PlayStation 5 owners get Starfield, no one is hurt. Anyone that was going to buy an Xbox to play Starfield did that already. Anyone that was going to make the move and go like, well, I'm selling my PlayStation so I can get into because they don't have Starfield, there will not be enough of those to where someone's going to be really mad, going like, oh, if only and because they needed it so bad on day one that it made them, you know. So like the idea of waiting a year for it feels like a theoretical argument more than anything else. But whatever, people will get mad because that's all they're really good at that. In other news, Bandai Namco also had their earnings call. Looks like they canceled 5 unannounced games, and they have seen, I took this story because it's just such a big number, and then when you piece out why it's the way it is, you're like, okay, that's not nearly as bad as it seems. A 96.5% drop in income year over year. So for the holiday season of this year compared to the holiday season of the year before, income down 96.5%. Which seems like Elden Ring is kind of the factor there. You know, they don't have a big game. They don't have a big long tail selling game like Elden Ring propping up their entire year. So a lot of their comparisons for this year may look a little soft, I suppose. Yeah, they had Armored Core. Armored Core is not Elden Ring, you know. Tekken 8's doing well. We'll see how well it sells and all that sort of stuff. I'm not going to get into it because we've just been on this subject for so long here, but gamesindustry.biz has a good article kind of talking more and more about investors, and if investors are investing in video games and why they are not, and all of that sort of stuff. Gamesindustry.biz, go check it out. Basically, the takeaway here is that they have multiple people on the record at venture capital firms and some of that other stuff kind of saying like, the bar is way higher. Like, yeah, there's stuff that's getting funded, but the bar to get funded is quite a bit higher, including like people saying like, hey, we want teams that are invested in the game, meaning that they have skin in the game, as they say, which is to say that you yourselves have invested your own money into it and you aren't just coming to them for the full funding. They want you on the hook for something so that you'll actually develop the game and do a good job, as opposed to you just get their money and then go, cool, man, whatever happens, we got this money, and then walk away from it. Or don't do your best because who cares? You got the money anyway, or whatever. So some accountability in the investment space, I rarely look at as a bad thing. I tend to fall on the side of you should try to build real businesses as opposed to fake businesses that you just intend to sell to someone else. And let them figure it out. Go like, well, I don't know, we built up an audience. You figure out how to make money off of it. I gotta go. I tend to favor the idea of sustainable, real businesses. Call it old school, I suppose. But yeah, that's an interesting article if you want to get some perspective from the investor side of things as to where things are at with games. But it's similar to a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. Like, this year's fucking rough. And from their perspective, they're saying like, well, interest rates will go down and that'll change some things. The inflation story is changing, and so that will help. And that there are just things about money right now that had gotten bad that are kind of potentially improving. But that everyone is kind of looking at it from a perspective of like, let's not just throw money around. Let's throw money at real things that are actually going to do something, or that have a real shot to do something, as opposed to just like, we've got 30 people and a crazy idea. We need this $20 million. Like, all right. Quick little thing here. I don't know what so IGN has something called IGN Fan Fest that I guess I don't know if they're trying to just do to bundle up a bunch of announcements around a specific week here, but they're doing some event this month. Oh God. And it's auto playing some fucking ad at me. Thank you, IGN. I guess that is ongoing, and whatever, I don't know. But anyway, so the basically tomorrow they have something that is called the Fan Fest Game Trailer Showcase, which is a bunch of trailers for video games. It's a bunch of announced stuff. It's the next Contra. There's a bunch of Konami stuff on here. Rocket Knight Adventures Resparked. There's the Dave the Diver trailer. There's the Llamasoft thing from Digital Eclipse is here. A new World of Assassination target for Hitman. But the standout thing that the folks, or I guess the person over at Gematsu noticed is that fucking Ninja 5.0 is on the list. I don't know if you remember Ninja 5.0. It is the awesome grappling hook ninja game that Konami published on the GBA that had become something of a rarity and started becoming incredibly expensive. And it's one of those rare cases where an expensive game is actually worth it because the expensive game is fucking awesome. Ninja 5.0 is a cool fucking game that you should check out. And I don't know what this is, and no one seems to know what this is. All we know is that IGN is going to be showing a trailer for something. It just says Ninja 5.0 on this list. Is there a new Ninja 5.0? Is this a re-release is this some kind of collector's edition reissue of Ninja 5.0? I don't know. Is there a new game? I don't know. But it sounds like at some point tomorrow we will know of what that is. Yeah, is it a limited run collector's edition? Yeah, there's a lot of things it could be. I don't know that anything has been announced, or at least when I was putting this all together yesterday, nothing had been announced about it at all. So so at some point tomorrow morning-ish, we should find out what the heck this is. If there is, I don't know. Ninja 5.0 is a good game. You should check it out if you haven't. It's a game that kind of falls through the cracks a little bit these days, but you know, a lot easier to get your hands on a copy these days. But if you want a physical copy, it's pricey. It's expensive. I've got one here somewhere. But yeah, that's a kick-ass game. And that's going to do it for the news. Thanks everybody for newsing it up with me. Why don't we get into some emails? Podcast@guard.bike is the email address for you to send emails to me. $300 for a copy of Ninja 5.0 cart only. That's not as, I mean, that is expensive. That is a lot of damn money. That is not. I've seen worse games selling for way more money than that, I suppose. JR in Longmont, Colorado writes in and says that he's over there kitty corner to me. He's got all these llamas. He's with United Parcel, and he needs a check for $73.26. JR writes in and says, do you think there's a chance that Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo could be forced, like Apple, to open their platforms for alternate stores or payment methods under Europe's Digital Markets Act? The key pieces seem to be in place. You've got locked hardware requiring a gatekeeper to get software on the platform. Maybe there isn't an authority interested in chasing that argument down, but it sure would be fun to watch everyone say how they're not as big as Apple. I could see it. The closed, and this is when I talk about, hey, what if the next Xbox is an open platform or a more open platform? Because they obviously do have dev mode. It is compared to the PlayStation and compared to the Switch, the Xbox is a significantly more open platform, just not in the way that we're really talking about here. But yeah, when I talk about like, hey, what if the next Xbox just ran Windows and was as open as Windows is, and you could just install Steam OS, or just run Steam Big Picture mode on it, or blah blah blah. I don't know. Microsoft did say that the changes that Apple is making to its storefront and the changes that they're making in the EU are still shitty enough that they don't see a way to really monetize on iOS, and so they're, it sounds like they're not really pursuing putting Game Pass directly. Well, I guess they don't have to, because they changed the rules so that Game Pass could theoretically just exist on the Apple Store in some form anyway. But yeah, I mean, Sony and Nintendo and they're all running these closed storefronts. You can't load an alternate storefront onto it. They are very similar to phones. But I don't, is there a monopoly in the space that you have to look at and go like, oh, well, like, does the existence of the PC mean that there is still alternatives for these games on the marketplace or in the overall marketplace and all of that? I just don't know that would go through. When we think about like how limited the victory was in the case against Apple for opening up their stuff, and how poor of a job they're doing at actually opening it up, I don't necessarily think that they pursuing that on the consoles would actually go far enough. I think that there's things that they could lean on that I think that would get them out of having to open up their devices. So yeah, there's ins and outs of that I'm not, that I would have to reread to be fully up on this, but I don't think that would go that far. Kyle in Colorado Springs writes and says, what was your impression the first time you saw or played Seaman on the Dreamcast? It was annoying because there's nothing there, and it takes weeks and weeks of playing it before Seaman does anything. You're just like sitting there. We got the Japanese version, and you know, obviously that's another level of, you know, it makes it even harder because you have to speak Japanese to Seaman. And so we got it, and we were just like, we are completely ill-equipped to do anything with this. Or we had our Japanese correspondent, who was there in the office at the time. He started playing Seaman. And so we would watch him play it and watch him speak Japanese to the Seaman. And I always loved the concept of Seaman. I think that Seaman is amazing. I always felt like they should have made another Seaman, but then they did do Seaman 2 for, it was like PlayStation 2. And it's not. So Seaman, I love that it existed. I love that happened, but I never really felt like I had my time with Seaman. Because I just never got to the point where I was doing anything cool with it. It was always just like, oh, is this thing ever going to hatch? Or did I leave the light on too long and kill it? Like, shit. All right. Do I need to start over? I don't even know. Randy in Portland says, what was your Nintendo 64 kid console? Which console made you flip out in a box slapping frenzy when you received it as a gift? Mine was the Sega Saturn. It was brand new at the time, and I wanted it so damn bad, but never expected my parents to ever buy me one. A truly fantastic moment in my gaming history. I don't think I ever had that reaction to it, but it was probably the NES. If not the NES, then the Commodore 64, or the 128, I suppose. That was probably because the NES was the first home console that had happened in years. I had been playing games on my Atari 400 for years at that point. That was how I played games at home before the NES came out. And it was awesome. But the NES coming out was a very big deal because it had a robot. And so that year, that was like a Santa Claus style gift. And so that year, my parents took everything. I also got a computer desk. Instead of the like rapidly deteriorating desk that I had my computer on at that point, they got a proper computer desk. And they took everything all out of the boxes and all that other stuff, and they built the desk, and they had the desk sitting in the living room, and then put all the NES stuff on the desk. And so the robot was there and all of that stuff. And so me being me, I woke up at some point after they had done that and poked my head out and kind of quietly looked down the hallway and saw Rob the robot staring back at me and just went like, fucking cool. And then had to go back in and lay back in bed and wait for it to actually be time to do presents or whatever. And I don't know. That was real cool. Johnny in Clinton, New York writes in and says, I was watching your Foam Stars stream, and I heard you make a quick comment about the Lynx and the surfing game in California Games, which I absolutely loved back in the day. I had that handheld when I was very young and absolutely loved it. I was too young, though, to understand the context and where the Lynx ultimately fit into the gaming landscape at the time. If you have any insight into the history of the Lynx or how it was viewed at the time, that would be really cool to hear. So the Lynx never, I stole Glenn's Atari Lynx because he got one from Atari and it was just sitting there, and he gave it to me. I ended up with it. I don't know how that, some mix of whatever. But like he had a fat stack of Lynx games and a Lynx sitting there in his house that he was not really doing anything with, and so I ended up grabbing that and playing all of those games and being really enamored. I really like the Lynx. It's a handful of games. I like Pinball Jam, which has that Elvira pinball game on it. I like Crystal Mines 2, Chips Challenge, California Games, a handful of others, but really those to me are the big ones. Super Squeak, that was a multi-platform game. Gauntlet, a Gauntlet game came out on the Lynx that wanted you to hold the console sideways, and it was a weird first-person Gauntlet game, and it's a terrible video game. It's garbage. And holding the Lynx this way is very, especially the original one, which is even longer and dumber. It was a very stupid way to play a video game. Gauntlet 3, I believe it's called Gauntlet 3. Or it's Gauntlet the Third Encounter, whatever it is. Gauntlet on the Lynx is a terrible experience. And yeah, you can you can play it different ways now and all that sort of stuff, and not have to hold it all fucking stupid. But Gauntlet was the game that I remember being promoted most when the Lynx was coming out. I remember that being one of the games that, for whatever reason, was shown, maybe because it was like, hey, it's the next game in the Gauntlet franchise, and all the other stuff was all just this weird shit that you'd never heard of, and like California Games, which is great. But like, yeah, Gauntlet has like ridiculous classes. Like, it's so far removed from the first two Gauntlet games that is like barely recognizable as a Gauntlet game. And that was a game you could link a bunch of them together with the Lynx cables to play multiplayer. And that's like the idea that you're going to ever encounter multiple people that have a Lynx, let alone the cables and all of you holding it sideways. It's just, it's just not, that would have been neat to see, but I don't think that ever happened in humanity. But the Lynx, I remember it kind of just coming out, and the magazines talked about it a little bit, but it was never a situation where like people were excited about it. Like, oh yeah, the Game Boy is dead. Like the Game Gear had a lot more excitement around it because, it was Sega. You knew Sega. Like Atari at that point already was kind of, on a downward slope, even, by the time the Jaguar came out, especially, it's like Atari was already in a weird spot where it's just like, oh yeah, Atari, because they put out the 7800, and it's fun to go look at those games now, but like in an era when the NES was coming out, the very idea of an Atari 7800 existing, you're like, this is terrible. What? So Atari was already kind of cooked when the Lynx came out. But I love that thing. I don't know. I still do. Like, the games have just a cool, like, it's got like a sprite scaling kind of thing to it that always looks real weird, but it's got like a cool look to it. The sound capabilities are pretty good. It's a cool console. It's a cool little handheld. I don't know. Then they put out the second one that was like much more reasonably shaped and sized. And it was just a cool thing. Yeah. Yes. Some of the same folks that built the Amiga built the Lynx, which is interesting. It doesn't necessarily feel that way. But yeah, I always really liked it. It's such a strange, it's such a strange console. The library is really weird because it's just full of games that never really existed anywhere else. And, a few arcade ports here and there, like Robotron came out, stuff that Atari controlled, but like, it was just its own weird thing. And so at a time when we were getting more and more of the same games across 4 platforms, meaning the big third parties, the Acclaims of the world, were putting out games on, Game Boy, Game Gear, Genesis, and SNES. the Lynx didn't get any of that third-party love. And so it just was this other weird thing off to the side that never really felt like it was part of the real like kind of like a TurboGrafx. Like it was just like, here's this other weird thing and it's got all these other games on it. And you're like, what is this? What is going on over here? I love the Lynx. It's a sickness, I suppose. Let's see. Eric from St. Louis says, if I were to put a Lemmings game on my Steam Deck to jump into, which one would you recommend and which version? Man. I'm played almost all of my Lemmings on a CD TV, on an Amiga, basically, on a consoleized Amiga, but with a mouse plugged into it. So it was basically the Amiga version of the game. But I think that is the version. But like on a Steam Deck, you know, you're not going to really have a mouse. And so you can play it with a controller just fine. At least I assume that version, but I wouldn't jump through all the hoops to emulate an Amiga on a Steam Deck just to play Lemmings, I guess, if that makes any sense. There are, because they did do, is there a 16-bit Sega version of Lemmings? Because I bet that would be okay. I might go to that one. I assume there's also a SNES version, so I might. Yeah, I mean, it's on everything. It's fucking Lemmings. I bet that those 16-bit versions are totally fine. Yeah, does this SNES version have weird levels? The SNES version seems like the one that could be that's why I initially said Genesis, because I bet that version is just somehow slightly more faithful, even if it probably loses some color depth along the way. Lemmings was awesome. I don't know. Like they made a bunch of them after that. There's the Lemmings 3D, and there was like wasn't there a downloadable, like a PSN release of Lemmings? Or like, was it PS3 or PS4? But now Sony owns Lemmings and we just never see it anymore. So yeah. Garrick from Grand Rapids writes in and says, just wants to talk about the history of the Xbox brand a little bit and why the Xbox 360 was so well regarded. This is something that ties into like a lot of that Xbox business update thing was them focused on talking about the investments they make in the platform to make games, the experience of playing games smooth, which is a weird thing because they didn't get as specific as they maybe could have. But if you actually break it down, things like smart delivery, things like the way Xbox Live works and all of that stuff, like they have done quite a lot of work on there. So anyway, that kind of ties into this a little bit. A lot of people forget what a system seller Xbox Live was to the early days of the 360. Easy online gaming and features like cross-game voice chat and cross-game invites wouldn't come to PlayStation until years later. Sure, Gears of War and Halo sold a lot of consoles, but cross-platform games with major online components regularly sold 3-1 on Xbox versus PlayStation. The Xbox team kept the brand fresh by regularly adding features like UI updates, avatars, the Summer of Arcade, Game Room, Netflix watch-along parties, and plug-and-play support for external USB drives, just to name a few. The Xbox brand still felt fresh and innovative as late as 2010, even as the aging 360 struggled to hit 30 frames per second in many AAA titles. However, by 2012, everything that made the Xbox 360 unique had become industry standard. It's just something I wanted to get off my chest for about a week. Yeah, no, totally. Yes, I mean, some of those bigger than others, right? I don't like avatars. I don't think they did avatars very well. For example. Even today, they still do avatars. It's somewhere in that Xbox. You can dig in there deep and eventually find them. I don't know why you would. But yes, achievements, a gamer score, the social aspects of Xbox Live were massive. For the time. Because think about what was coming before that on the PlayStation 2 and the Dreamcast. Sega wanted you to sign up for their dial-up ISP, SegaNet. Like it was a long time ago. The online stuff on the PlayStation 2 was game specific, and so you might have to remember a login and password for a specific game versus, having a system-wide login and everything else. And, on the PS2, you occasionally had games that were charging money for access, like when Resident Evil, one of those Resident Evil games started selling access, like same as the Phantasy Star Online Hunters license. Like it just, it was a Wild West thing. The online support on consoles up to that point. Even Xbox Live on the original Xbox, which is something that they were touting before the console was the original first Xbox ever came out. They were like, oh yeah, gaming on the internet is going to be huge. We got an Ethernet port on this thing and a hard drive. We're ready. And then you're like, great, awesome. I can't wait to get Halo. That was a weird misinformation thing in the early days of Xbox. Was there was definitely an aspect of people like thinking that Halo 1 could be played on the internet. And obviously it would be years before Xbox Live became a thing on the original Xbox. And it was just weird. But the 360 standardized that stuff. And I think that they have done a really good job. And I think, some of it goes back to Microsoft's roots as they make OSs, they make software. They are a software company and they make an OS. They have a lot of subscription services now, and then they can use a lot of those learnings and all of that stuff. I think that just the experience of the Xbox 360 was head and shoulders above the PlayStation. Even by the time the PlayStation 3 finally got PSN and it got trophies and all the later updates when they finally got there, it was a weird... Xbox Live Gold felt like it was worth paying for, even in the wake of the PSN updates on PS3. Because everything was more standardized. Everything like you had 100 slots on your friends list, and you cared about who those 100 people were. And all the party chat and all all the system level stuff that you could do was really fucking neat. And it kind of got away from them a little bit there. By the end of the Xbox 360 and some of the stuff they were doing, when they ditched the blades in favor of avatars, but like I was much more receptive to the idea of wearing a headset on the Xbox 360 because all of that stuff was quaint and new enough then that like talking to strangers was still like, oh yeah, this would be an okay thing. Like I had no problem hooking up a camera and playing Uno with people when the Xbox Live Vision camera came out. That was cool as shit, man. That was fucking awesome. And then they're like, what if the console could just do Skype? What if you could do this? What if you could do this? And what if it watched television? And the Xbox One, like Eric says here, a lot of the stuff of the Xbox 360 became kind of standardized by the time that console was on its way out. But I think you have to keep in mind of just how well the Xbox 360 contained all of those features. And then the Xbox One came along and like it technically could do all the same stuff, but they had just scattered it everywhere. The whole interface. Like I still think that like looking up and finding your achievements on an Xbox Series X, even though they've redesigned that stuff multiple times by now, I still think that the pull-out menu on the Xbox Series X, I still think it sucks. The UI is still a weird mess by comparison because they just do too much. that more than the rise of the PlayStation 4, I think that the UI of the Xbox One and where achievements got dumped off to ruined achievements. You know? Nowadays, when I look at my achievements, I have to go to True Achievements. I have to go to a third-party website if I want to look at that stuff in a way that is like cohesive and relevant to me. And they've improved the on-console experience for sure. But the Xbox 360 was just better at being a game machine. And so all of that stuff was right there. It wasn't like, hey, now we're going to do this. And like, you could argue that the feature set has grown in a way that is awesome as well. But like, I don't know. Like, it just feels like when you pull out that side menu on an Xbox Series X, there's just so much shit there. And the achievements are there. They're right there. You can get at them. You can find them. And by the time you're like 3 button presses in, you're like, I don't even care anymore, man. I'm good. I guess I could turn on the achievement tracker and like pin it. Like, I'm not going to do that either. That's a shame. I don't know. I just recently crossed the 175,000 achievement point marker, which I don't, okay. Like that's barely anything anymore, I guess. It's still more than most of the people on my friends list last time I looked, but it's frustrating because I think that stuff was very cool. The fun little bragging rights that could come with that if you had friends that you were, you know, that's where it mattered, you know. You're like, oh, I've got a friend who's also playing this game and look at this, I did this, and you know, that stuff was fun. That stuff was super fucking fun. And it was very well done. And you know, having that stuff start to cross platforms more, and just like, you know, the Xbox 360 for a while was the only social console. The PS3 didn't really have any of that stuff, and so there was no one was saying, well, I got the trophies, and you're like, I don't care. You know, it was just the 360, and so, you know, it was much easier then. But of course, when the Xbox One came out and everyone bought a PS4 instead, that stuff extra broke. You know, that stuff broke times 10 to the point where it was just like, okay, now there's no easy way for me to look at what my friends are doing because I don't even know what console they're doing it on. And also they shifted away from and I think this is the right move, right? Because especially for high traffic accounts or whatever you want to call them or something like that, they all moved to the Xbox moved to a follower and following model as opposed to friends, where you can just go follow anybody and you know, keep track of their progress. And there's like, you would never know it, but there's a whole fucking social network built into the Xbox where like there's an activity feed of like what your friends are doing and what achievement they earned, and you can go write a comment under it if you want, or just like give it a thumbs up. There's like a system of clubs. You can go start and join clubs on an Xbox. Remember when they rolled all that out? And some of those, like the Forza games, still kind of tie into the club systems. Like Forza Horizon 5 came out, and when you started an in-game club, it also propagated as an Xbox level club in a way that seems totally broken if you're looking at it from the wrong view. There's like a whole weird system in there that like they should just, I don't know, like it's not hurting anybody, but I was gonna say they should just fucking tear it out and build something better, because they don't or find a better way to present that stuff if they want people to care about it. But maybe the ship has sailed and no one's ever going to care about it. But like, there's so many features built into the Xbox that were either just like fire and forget features of just like, oh yeah, we never updated it because we got it out the door, who cares? Or things that just like launched, used to be good, and then got pushed to the back and never seen again. Because like the thing that they did is they launched they built a social network at a time when no one wanted to do that anymore. when people just were like, if they're going to talk about that stuff, they're going to do it on Facebook, they're going to do it on Twitter, or whatever. You don't need another social network, especially one where you're typing with a game controller, you know? Like, that's just not a thing that people want to do. So I think that a lot of that stuff you could just yank out. I would love to see like a much more stripped down feature set for the consoles these days when it comes to like those sorts of social features. I would love to just see like a push towards like, hey, this is a much simpler device, and as a result, your achievements are right here, and this is, you know, and have that stuff just kind of work better. But I don't know. Like they still support avatars. Like why? Again, why? Is it because people might have spent money on an avatar, and so it's like this weird backwards compatibility? We just want to make sure that if you bought a fucking, you know, I think I still have my Tom Cruise. No, I forget what I have, but there was like the Mission Impossible gamer picture set out on the 360, and that was the fucking Ving Rhames picture. It was just amazing. But yeah, I don't know, man. The thing they did say in that business update when they started talking about the investments in the platform, I do think that a lot of people either take that for granted or don't realize just how good some of that stuff is. Because it's stuff that you don't encounter every day, or you don't encounter all the time. But the stuff like smart delivery, where it's going to download the right version of the game for you, compared to when I go and try to buy a PlayStation 5 game that's also out on PlayStation 4, at launch, it was even more broken on the PS5 because you would often download the wrong version. Now they do a much better job of like, here's the stuff you bought. It's PS5, it's PS4. If you just hit this download button, we're only going to download the PS5 version, and that's it. We've solved it. But like, it's still clunky. Like the process of saves going from one version of a game to another, the upgrade path and save transfer, all of that stuff is way, way, way worse on the PlayStation side of things. The thing is like, that's something that you only encounter when you're doing cross-generational stuff, and the PS5 is old enough now that you're probably not going to encounter it nearly as much. Whereas on the Xbox, the saves just work in the background. You never have to think about it. Like, that's something they've even, like, it's almost scary how little power you have over saves on an Xbox and backing them up or whatever else. Like, they really just kind of want to put them in the cloud and not let you fuck with them. Not let you download them and modify them and re-upload them and re-sign them and unlock achievements. And, you know, like, there's a bunch of shady shit. The other thing that kind of killed my interest in achievements was seeing just how easy it was to force achievements onto a profile that hadn't played a game yet. Like, the tools eventually existed to, especially once you could keep your Xbox profile on a USB stick, you could just take that USB stick, throw it in a PC, have the right tools to extract the files from it, hex edit a bunch of, you know, like there were tools in place to say like, add this game to my profile, unlock these achievements on my profile, now copy it all back to the USB device and now re-sign it to make it look like it's all legit and official. And when you plug it in, it will sync with the network. The network will say, hey, what did you do while you were offline? Because maybe you played some games and you just did it offline and we don't know about it. And then it would go, oh, wow, you played all these games and unlocked all these achievements? Okay, cool. We'll sync that to the server and now you're good. And people who did it to like great degrees would get their profiles banned. There was like one of the apps that was doing that was like, you can click this button and you can get 240,000 achievement points. And people would do that and their account would get banned. Or they'd be doing it with like free Xbox Live or like silver accounts or whatever else. Which is dumb. But if you were a person who was on the hunt for achievement sets for unreleased games, and you were running a site that had the ability to scrape profiles for achievements, which is what all the achievement sites are doing these days, then it behooves you to make a bunch of fake profiles, add a bunch of unreleased, because the game IDs were just hex IDs that if a demo or if anything for a game was up, you could usually get that hex ID and go like, okay, that's the game. And then you could add it to a profile and say, I played this game. And then if the achievements existed on the server, if the game name existed on the server and all other shit, it would yank it all down. And so that's, I think, how before Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe came out and it was just on Xbox Live servers as MK9 with a picture of a dog and it said K9. Like all of those achievements leaked months early. Like just crazy. Anyway, the good old days. But yeah, I on the system level and on the software end of the system level, I think that there's been a lot of really cool shit that Microsoft has done over the years. Backwards compatibility and the work they've done there. Auto HDR, I think, is really a phenomenal, cool thing. But they don't have the games. They don't even have all of the third-party games. You know, that was another thing a point they tried to make was all the biggest games are on Xbox. And it's like, yeah, I don't know, man. You're like a week away from the next Final Fantasy VII Remake installment shipping. Like, not that that's going to be necessarily a top seller for the year. And it's like, okay, it's no Roblox, I guess. But like, sometimes it just feels like there's still stuff missing from the Xbox platform. Is what I would say on that point. And the first party stuff ain't hitting the way it used to. I don't know. Doing that business update at a time when people were starting to go crazy about Helldivers probably doesn't help either. But hey, yeah, thin year for Sony ahead from the looks of things. We'll see how it all nets out at the end. I don't know. They just made different decisions about how they were going to tackle the pandemic, or the different things happened to them, and we'll see how it all goes. But yeah, weird week for news. This mix of like next generation talk and pro console talk mixed with like margins are in the shitter, and so, you know, the lineup for this year looks bad, and Nintendo's lineup could potentially be weird if they're suddenly shifting a console into next year. Like 2024, I was looking at a list. I was looking at the Wikipedia list for games for 2024. And there's certainly some stuff on there. You know, Dragon's Dogma 2 is coming out this year. That's cool. There's certainly plenty to look forward to, but real different vibe right now. Real weird. Feels real weird right now. So I don't know. We'll see how it all goes. That's all I can say. But yeah, Dragon's Dogma 2 is out next month. That's incredible news. So we'll see where it all goes. That's gonna do it for the show, everybody. This one hurt my throat a little bit. I don't know why. This drink is mostly full. Maybe I just drank less fluid. But I'm gonna need to go drink some tea. Something. Some soothing tea. Everyone have a good rest of your Tuesday. I'll be back on Wednesday. We'll stream some video games. I'm not sure what. Maybe a little Helskate. Maybe a little Deep Rock Galactic Survivor. Unless something else presents itself. Those seem like decent, safe bets. Well, maybe we'll do that on Wednesday. And of course, on Friday, we'll look at 8-bit Nintendo games. Whew. Boy. Come on through. We're closing in on 200 ranked NES games. We have 195 on the list right now. So come through and check it out. Check out the Patreon as well. Patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. You can get on board the great space coaster. Have a good one. I'll see you then.